Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Cornelius Hattingh, Director of Revenue Integrity at ARC, and with me today is Rich.
Hi, I'm Rich Licato. I am responsible for enterprise risk and cybersecurity at ARC.
Hi, I'm Doug Nass. I'm the Director of Fraud Investigations at ARC.
And I'm Phil Rendell from Travelport, and I'm Product Director, look after all of our payments and settlement processes.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Today we want to go through some of the risks that we've seen in the travel industry with a focus on cybercrime, form of payment risk, and also business model type risk. I don't seem to have the slides going, if that's possible. Yeah. There we go. So this is just a quick overview of what we'll be touching on. We won't touch on every single topic here, but on the cybersecurity piece, this is what we've been seeing. And then also on the financial payment side, those are mainly the issues we deal with. And the business model side of things is sort of mainly around impersonations, duping consumers into thinking they're an airline, and other issues that we'll be discussing here shortly. So as we just highlighted that here real quickly, I want to go through some stats. It'll be a short review of stats, but it's important to set the scene here for us. So the travel and leisure is in the top three. It's one of the top three industries with the highest rate of suspected fraud in 2023, and remains a target for fraudsters with an 8% increase in fraud attempts year over year. In addition, it also remains a target for ransomware. And if you recall, in 2023, MGM had a major ransomware attack where they were completely shut down. People couldn't even get into their rooms. It was so advanced. And then the FBI Internet Crime Complaint Center reported receiving over 114,000 phishing complaints in 2019. In 2021, that grew to 323, and yet at the end of 2023, they had about 298,000 complaints. So still very high, but Phil, you and I spoke about that just real briefly, that those numbers really doesn't really reflect the true issue. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Yeah. That's just what's being reported. So having that background a little bit, we're going to dive in here real quick into the phishing issues that we've been seeing in the last couple of years, affecting the American market, and what we've done here at ARC to sort of prepare travel agencies in order to protect themselves in the event of phishing emails. And so, Rich, we've made some changes to the reporting agreement, done things around Section B changes, and we've put some recommendations out there, including multi-factor. So could you take us through that and also just give a brief overview of what multi-factor authentication means to everyone?
Sure. Thanks, Cornelius. The three major things that we put out in Section B for the ARA is around the use of strong passwords. We'd like everybody to have a complex password and actually use passphrases. For ARC, that's 14 characters or more that we've asked for. Second is around multi-factor authentication, as Cornelius mentioned. And multi-factor authentication refers to something that you know, like your user ID and password, something you have, maybe a code or an email that gets sent to you with a code in it, similar to what you might find from your banking application or financial applications. And something you have, sometimes it's your fingerprint or a biometric information. The last thing that we've changed within the ARA is to have a training requirement, which ARC will administer and have some more information coming out shortly.
Yeah, perfect. And Doug, we've been very close to these phishing attacks. Why do you think the travel market or travel agencies are targeted predominantly in America in this? And then we'll talk a little bit there with Phil as well, jumping in on what we see globally.
Yeah, the thing about an airline ticket, it is highly commoditized. It's something that can be basically stolen quickly, whether it's through a hack or a unauthorized breach of a GDS system, regular old credit card fraud schemes. But there's a wide audience around the world for anyone that is looking for that cheap deal. That they don't want to ask questions, and that fraudster has tons of people that they can go to that are willing to buy them. The value of it is just for that flight, right? So there's a short value time for it, easily converted. They can make a lot of money and cost this industry a huge amount of headaches.
Yeah, thanks for that, Doug. Phil, what about the BSP market? What are you guys experiencing there around phishing or other cybercrime?
Yeah, so I mean, this isn't just the US. We're seeing this globally everywhere we go. How I see it is that the GDS is almost like a bank of travel, as it were. Every set of credentials that are out there to access this bank is a way into the bank, and a path of weakness that somebody can expose to get into that bank and commit the fraud. Every credential is a door. That door can be exposed, can be left open, by phishing attacks where somebody's asking for your credentials and you're giving it to them. That's the easiest way in. And also, the exposing of very weak credentials, a weak password. Doug, I think you mentioned, Rich, I think you mentioned complex passwords. The easier a password is to guess, the easier it is to get into the bank and commit the fraud. So, yeah, we're seeing exactly the same things. And, at Travelport, we're always very trying to make our customers aware of the risks. Any email that goes out from an account manager or a help desk to a customer will have a kind of in bold red at the bottom of the email saying, we will never ask you for your credentials. So we're trying to raise awareness to our customers not to fall for these scams, phishes, and so on and so forth.
And
that's perfect, yeah.
Yeah, that's all the GDSs. They've vowed across the board as an industry, they will never send out a legit email requesting the user, the recipient, to click on this link and use your login and log in your credentials. It is always, they may send you information about updating information, but go to your bookmark in your browser, make changes that way. Do not click on those links.
Another important item is sharing of credentials, right? So we really discourage that. Nobody should be sharing their credentials, user ID, passwords. And when we get into multi-factor authentication, it's very hard to share that phone or that email.
Yeah, it makes it a lot more complex, right? Yeah. And then also, I think that also creates issues to make multi-factor authentication feasible, right? Because of the sharing of credentials and so on. But Phil, I liked what you said there a little bit ago about the banking, acting like a bank, right? And so if you think about it, when you in your personal life, your bank today is asking you to provide dual-factor authentication. And I think in the travel industry or in our current environment, the need for multi-factor is essential. And that's where we're driving this, and ARC is driving it, and the GDSs are driving that as well. So there's definitely a focus on the need to have multi-factor authentication in place. But we also have a sample case, Doug, that you've experienced firsthand, right, with one corporate travel agency where I'll let you talk to it, and then you'll take us through the success that they had with applying multi-factor.
This is a great success story for how implementing multi-factor authentication stopped a particular fraudster dead in his tracks. But we were chasing a fraudster who was doing account takeovers of corporate booking tools. And between probably May, June of last year up until the very end of November, I could go into our systems. There were a lot of repeat travelers in the scheme, traveling all over the world. And I could get on his trail every morning to see what he did in the past 24 hours. So, and he had hundreds and hundreds of travelers. It was no big deal to come in the morning and see, there's another $25,000 in tickets out the door, another 40, 50. That was pretty routine. And then all of a sudden, at the beginning of December of last year, just went off the radar. Like, what happened? What's changed? So I'm a few weeks later, I'm finding out through the grapevine that one of the largest provider of corporate booking tools, or if you call them online booking tools, sent to your corporate or university clients, it implemented multi-factor. They saw that there was a need, and it stopped this particular fraudster cold. This particular person, I've traced probably about $2 million worth of tickets in what he's been doing. And then at the beginning, and this goes on for about 5 weeks into early January of this year, up pops his repeat travelers again. But he had moved on. He could no longer get into the biggest provider of the corporate booking tool. He went and found a rival, a competitor, and was in there nearly every day. Just so he never stopped. He just needed another door to get in. So it's a great success story for multi-factor. And I usually say, in my private life, I wouldn't deal with a bank that didn't offer that. My pension, 401k, if you don't have it, I'm not your customer. It's just not the reality in 2024. It's not 2014 anymore.
Exactly.
They're so sophisticated now.
Absolutely.
You need that layer of protection.
And that cyber attack environment is just growing. We heard it yesterday, and throughout the conference, like more and more agencies are driving the online model, right? So protecting yourself, ensuring you have the protections in place, obtain them where you need to obtain them, and implement them. Use them to your advantage. Protect your business from cyber attacks. Really, Rich, do you want to add anything else there around? We've talked about it. Multi-factor seems to be the best option for us out there. Is there anything else in addition to passwords and so on? What should the agencies do out there to protect themselves?
Yeah, well, luckily, software manufacturers have built in a lot of these tools and protections into their software. So, for instance, Microsoft has an embedded firewall. So when you turn on your computer, you have some protection built in there. Antivirus and anti-malware software are now part of the operating system or part of your browser. The most important thing for anything is making sure that your software is up to date, that you're getting automatic updates, that you're getting those patches automatically to update your operating system and your browser and your computer on a regular basis.
Awesome. So let's move on to something a little bit different. It's been in the industry. It's been a fraud model, and that's the business model fraud. We've seen it. Fake agencies coming in, pretending to be an airline, pretending to be an agent. That has a major impact on the industry. Has a major downstream impact. You've got a lot of consumer complaints through that type of model, and it's been sort of had a big impact on the industry, and it's still out there. But we've seen some emerging trends, and Phil, you brought that to our attention around fake certification, and the person or the wannabe agency is not even an agent yet, and they sort of already starting to commit fraud, right? So can you talk us through that and what you guys have seen out there, or heard of at least?
Yeah, so more recently we've started becoming aware of agents who want to become accredited, who are using fake Travelport training certificates or certificates of competence or whatever they need for their accreditation. So yes, we've been made aware that there are a lot of fake certificates out there that are being presented, and that doesn't really augur well, does it, for somebody who's trying to get into the business legitimately? If they're committing fraud at the very first stage, it doesn't look very good going forward. So, but yes, it's a completely different kind of fraud. Rather than trying to hack into a bona fide agent, they're becoming agents themselves, or they like to be. So yeah, we're very conscious of that and looking for ways that, our certificates of training and stuff can be verified by anybody who needs to look at them. So yeah, we're very actively looking at that.
Right. And Doug, I think this is not the first time we hear about fake certificates, right? You talked to it, but we've definitely seen fake certification in many guises and forms in the data that we look at, and when we work with the airlines as well that they present to us. So let you give us a bit of background there.
Yeah. So not only in addition to the fake certificates for the GDS training, we see examples of fake death certificates. So if a customer wants to go to the agent, say, hey, I can't take this trip, the ticket's non-refundable. Some of these agents have decided they're going to Photoshop a fake death certificate or a fake medical document to get a waiver code in order to refund a non-refundable ticket. So what's hilarious is some of these, when you see them one after the other, they're so blatantly Photoshopped. It's one of those things where you have a chuckle and you say, okay, you got sneaky, but we're going to come after you. So
sometimes
it's
the states don't even line up, right? So.
Yeah, in one part of the document, you might have something that says State of New York. Another part of the document might say State of Ohio. You see the same funeral homes being used over and over again, the same death diagnosis, the same. If it's a medical waiver because they can't travel, it's always stage 4 cancer. Sorry, I'm not traveling anytime soon. So they're getting very creative about coming up with ways. It's manipulation. It's gaming the system. So we see it in every place. Even if there was nothing wrong with the initial ticket, they're trying to find a way to put the money back in their pocket, because even if they get the medical waiver or if they get the code, they might charge the customer yet another fee, to say this is the refund fee. They are constantly coming up with schemes to continue to draw money out of the customer for unjustified means, and it's happening constantly.
Right. So what sort of guidance would you give to the audience there to look out for in dealing with fake death certificates or anything to that effect?
Mostly, it's going to be for the airlines. It is keep an eye on who's coming in requesting those waiver codes or the refund waivers. Try to keep a log of who's constantly coming in. What are the email addresses being used? What do they actually look like? Look at the document and have a little internal library of, why do we see the same template being used over and over again? It does not take very long for someone to realize this is just complete and utter nonsense. But then we want to know at ARC as well, because that type of information, of course, is never going to come to us. But we will take action. We have taken action. We've terminated agencies who we have caught because the airline alerted ARC. We did our research, and we went back and either one put the agency on warning. This is a cease and desist notice, or if it's egregious enough, it crosses the line. If we've caught them doing other things, it's termination time. We just can't have you in our system.
Yeah, and manipulating that system as well. So we move on a little bit here into what the future holds around fraud, and I think we don't have the answers for it, but we definitely have concerns over it, and this is around deep fakes and AI. So Rich, what are your thoughts around this, and how do you see the fraudsters applying these new solutions and technologies that really meant to help all of us, be a little bit smarter, be a little bit quicker in what we do, and so on. But ultimately, the fraudsters are also going to get or probably already have their hands on this, and they're figuring out ways how to use it. What are your thoughts?
Right. So first, just as an example, I think most people might have heard of the story where a finance worker in Hong Kong received an urgent email, was asked to get on a conference call, and was on a call with people that he knew, people within the finance department and actually the chief financial officer, and all of those videos that he was interacting with were deep fakes. And so in the end, the CFO asked him to transfer $25 million into an account, and he did it. And so that just shows the level of sophistication people will go through when money's involved. I think there's a concern on the cybersecurity side, right? Of course, of how sophisticated attackers get. They're always trying to get your information. So, for instance, in phishing emails with AI, all the grammar problems go away, right? Yeah. So suddenly you'll have a perfect phishing email, and you won't be able to detect that you're getting phished.
So even more reason to really know what you're looking for when you suspect a phishing email, right? And the other advice there is never click a link that you're not sure of, or just don't click it.
Yeah, if in doubt, always contact the other party, right, to make sure that it's a legitimate interaction. Other things that I think we see is the sophistication now. If you can automate things through AI, you're no longer dealing with a human. You're dealing with a machine, and the way that they can react is much quicker than a human can. So when an attack is initiated, it just gets more sophisticated as it goes on, and I think that's something that all cybersecurity professionals have to prepare for in the future.
Okay, very good. Tinfil, you wanted to add something?
Yeah. I think the principles are the same, right? I mean, AI is just another dimension of what we're seeing today in phishing. Is, it's more intelligent phishing, but the principles of how we are aware of these things going on and the things to look for are the important. The principles are going to be the same for AI, right? I read an article yesterday that I believe that any voice can be replicated by AI from a 15 or less than 15-second voice clip. That's kind of scary. You could be taking a phone call from somebody who you think is your colleague or your friend or your boss or CEO or your VIP customers asking you to do something that you shouldn't be doing. But as I said, the principles of not giving out your credentials or sharing your credentials is, if that's up here, that I think we are covered.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I've heard of stories where they get a call from someone. It sounds like their daughter or an immediate family member who's in distress and or needs something, and then the people go and draw thousands of dollars and transmit this through a payment app or other ways, or and they're out that money. But yeah, this is where this comes in, and it's a major concern. And I think people can be easily duped into releasing tickets and or monies when you're not validating who you're dealing with firsthand.
And it comes down to training, right? And constant training. Like we at our account, we do it every month, right, Rich? Out of Rich's department, he's making sure every last person at ARC that it's not just the cybersecurity, it's the physical security. It's if you're on the road with your laptop, what do you do? His team sends out fun phishing emails, seeing how many people in the company fall for clicking on that link. But it's so key for the just repetitive, constant, and it's for everybody. It's not just certain people. It's every last person, correct?
It is, and I think it's important to look at the parallels not only in the professional world, right, but in your personal life as well. And so all those things that we ask you to do from a professional level, we hope that we're preparing you on a personal level, because it can come anywhere, whether it's through a banking email or an email that you get in your personal life or through work. So everybody needs to be prepared at all times.
Yeah, and just a personal thing, just probably about 4 or 5 months ago, I got a call at home. I didn't answer it, but I looked at the phone number. I said, they called again 5 minutes later, but in the meantime, I just Googled it. I'm like, it's my bank. So I picked up the phone this time. It wasn't my bank. But I did not give up any. They were asking. They did have my cell phone number. They had my wife's cell phone number. They knew that we banked at this small-ish credit union, and but they wanted to verify that there were transactions that they caught. Their fraud platform caught pre-auth. Of course, that seemed very sketchy. All they wanted to verify was my username.
Yeah.
No, not giving that up.
You'd be
sorry.
Without some money.
Yeah. So it's yeah, it's crazy.
Let's get into some questions here, and please keep asking your questions to us. I've got the iPad here, so we'll get into that. So here's a question for the panel. What are best practices for the amount of ticket fraud you should tolerate so that you're not rejecting a lot of valid transactions? Doug, you want to take this one? I mean, I can answer it.
What, me?
I can answer it. I'll take it. Okay. I mean, this is your own risk tolerance, right? Ultimately, you need to set that policy yourself. I don't think we can advise you on what that should be and what that looks like. I think you need to create or, run some, validate the transactions that are coming in, and over time establish what threshold is fit for your business, and what level of risk tolerance you have as a business. I don't think anybody can tell you what you should put that at. It's really based on your individual business model and practice.
And just think about, try to calculate how many legit transactions do you have to process in order to make up for that one chargeback. I know we ran some stats maybe about 5-6 years ago-ish, and how many good transactions they have to just to get back to the break-even point. Oh, yeah, and it was a lot. It was dozens.
Ridiculous. Yeah, just that one ticket plus all the fees and additional charges that come with it, and to make that back up again, if you only take your commission piece or your fee amount and apply that, you have to sell a lot of tickets to make up that one.
And especially if you're talking about, it's one thing to deal with a domestic fraudster whose tickets are going to be $300 to $500, $700-ish. Painful when a few dozen are out the door. But what happens if now 25 tickets that are international and they're $1,200 a piece, they're $3,000 a piece? That is a heck of a financial hit right there. And, the agency's going to be liable for those. So those are things you got to think about opening up new markets, letting in people that you don't, new customers. Have you vetted your new customers? Do you want to take that risk on?
And I think you just said it, vetting your customers. Really do your due diligence when you are dealing with anybody new coming to you for business. It's essential to do proper KYC and due diligence of your customer. And regardless of the size of your business, it's essential to validate who you're doing business with, because today the environment is you're so removed from who you're actually doing business with. Everything's done via email or via booking tool or, a different format than what we used to. So it's even more essential to validate that.
And we've been focusing a lot the last day or so of NDC. NDC is not immune to fraud. And it's not only a travel agent who might be impacted, but it's the airline. Has the airline done enough vetting to ensure that someone coming in and signing up saying, "Oh, I want my agency to have access to, XYZ Airlines NDC program." We just saw this 3-4 weeks ago. We got a call from the travel agent saying, "There's a series of tickets out of West Africa. I never issued these." And in fact, not only that, I can see that the GDS, the tickets were issued on a GDS that I have a complete different provider. I could never have issued these tickets on my own. And it was a fraudster who signed up with the airline, who's allowed it in, and here's this agent saying, "Why are these tickets here? There's just no way I could even issue these tickets. I was never part of the agreement." But the fraudster was, and they duped the airline. And then there's another one. This is from a few years ago. The first time Cornelius and I together ever looked at a spreadsheet of NDC ticketing data, I looked at it and I said, "This is all fraud." Just had to look at it. I knew it was automatically fraud. We went back to the airline multiple times to convince them, and then they finally said, "Oh, you're right, it is fraud." So NDC is not immune.
And it's the right time right now as you build your environments to let your customers in. If you're an airline and you're doing your NDC, to build the proper KYC and due diligence in at that front end, depending on how you bring those agencies in, and make sure that it's robust enough to filter out or validate at least that the people you are doing business with are the right people. Let's take one more question here. Who's ultimately responsible for the online fraud transactions? Is it the agency, the online tool, the customer? And then, in addition to that, is how best do agencies and airline and online booking tools work together?
Yeah, ultimately, now the chargeback, so a customer finds a charge that they're disputing, it goes back to the bank agrees, or the financial institution agrees. They look who's the merchant of record. So in the agency model, 99% of the time it's going to be the airline. They deal financial institution to the airline. The airline says, oh, I've got this debt. The ticket was actually issued by the travel agent. That's when the debit memo process starts. So it's going to go from the bank to the airline, and then ultimately responsible will be the travel agency who issued the ticket. That's just always been the model. I don't know of any other way around that, but it's going to be who allowed the booking to occur. Right. That's the key. That's the front door of the castle, right?
Absolutely.
And the castle walls need to be high enough to
protect that front door.
to stop the attack or stop the breach.
Absolutely. Phil, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think Doug summed it up pretty well. I mean, and every use case is different, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I got a question in. It's around multi-factor authentication as an industry. As ARC as well as the GDSs. There's a drive, as we mentioned at the beginning of the session, to have multi-factor authentication in place. Phil, what do you have anything? You guys, what are you doing? Anything specific around multi-factor? What is your objectives with multi-factor, and how are you going to distribute that? Or?
Multi-factor authentication is really high on our priority list. I mean, it's just a general good practice thing anyway. It's for our industry, it's extremely complex. There are so many layers of complexity. But what we're doing, is going to dovetail perfectly into what ARC is doing with your changes to Section B. So some of the complexities that we're seeing with MFA. Every travel agent is not equal. The travel agents are engaging with the GDSs in different ways and coming in different ways. It could be desktop, it could be via cloud, it can be via an API. There's no one-size-fits-all solution here. So that's kind of one layer of complexity that we've got. And another aspect of that, I guess, is agents are all structured very differently. For example, if our MFA product was a unique code being sent to a registered email address of that user, that means every user in every agency needs to have their own unique email address, right? With their corporate, a corporate email address, not a Hotmail or a Gmail or stuff like that, because that's a waste of time. So we have to make sure before we implement it that the mechanics behind it at the agency is also there and consistent. So it's not a turnkey solution that's going to happen overnight. It's actually quite a lot of complexity involved there. But as I said, it is a high priority, and it's coming soon.
I think, Rich, you mentioned it, right? The additional complexity for MFA is the sharing of credentials, and that just makes it so much harder. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Absolutely. I mean, trying to figure out where to send that second factor, as Phil mentioned, whether it's through an email or through a text message. If it's a text message, then your phone has to be registered somehow to receive that, right? So there's complexity there. Trying to incorporate it into old infrastructure is tough. But that forces everyone to have a unique ID and then a unique way to interact with them for that second factor of authentication.
Perfect. Coming up to time here, so we've touched on a couple of topics here. What some final takeaways that you would like to share with the audience, and what we've discussed here today, and what best practices would you advise on safeguarding the agency businesses and airlines? Open to anyone.
Start at the end.
Yeah. So I kind of got three things. One is awareness. Doug, you touched on ARC's awareness campaign of your employees. I think we all have a responsibility of being aware of what's going on around there. We should be making our employees aware, our colleagues aware, and all being, this should be natural for us to be doing every day. This is nothing special, right? This is just looking after the front door to your house. So I think awareness is a big thing, and Travelport does very much the same with our employees as ARC is doing. We get the fake phishing emails that if you click here, you're going to get fired, and if you don't click, you're going to get a bonus, right? But yeah, joking aside. Second thing is reporting. Cornelius, I think your stats at the beginning, as you said, there was 300,000 reported incidents of phishing or something like that. I dare say that's probably
just the US market.
Just the US. So globally, you can imagine what it's like. That said, I dare say the unreported incidents of phishing are probably tenfold of that. So, I think we all have a responsibility as well to report if we see something that looks dodgy. It quite likely is. So socializing and making people aware of what's going on is also really important. Third one is really, really obvious. Good cyber hygiene. Look after your credentials. Strong passwords. Don't share credentials. Basic things that we can all, every single one of us in this room can do to protect ourselves as best we can. We can't stop crime happening, but we can reduce the possibility of it happening. So, those are my 3 takeaways, really.
Perfect, thanks.
Yep,
Doug.
I wholeheartedly agree with everything. And it's the communication. If you see something, say something. Because I look back at the scenario I was talking about, the account takeovers of the corporate booking tools. The agency themselves have, placed everything, put all the safeguards in place. It's not their system being breached. It's the corporate booking tool by their corporate and university clients constantly. And the reason we even found out about it was the communication, the back and forth. A shout out to Direct Travel. They had an incident. There were only 5 passengers. This is how this all started, maybe 5 passengers, 3 credit cards. But through our research, we were quickly able to develop this was a major fraud scheme going on. Hundreds of passengers. I think I'm at about 2,000 tickets, $2 million in financial impact. But it was the communication piece. We at ARC can't see everything. We depend on our, usually when I do webinars or something, I often will say, hey, our agencies are our neighborhood watch. You see something, you say something. It could be just a one incident, fraud at one agency, but when we are able to do the research, it's industry wide. Huge.
In there, and that's something we do with the airlines, agencies, and the GDSs, and that's collaboration. And I think that's also been a theme during the conference as well, although be it in different aspects. But collaboration is key, and collaboration has had a lot of success in stopping fraud in general, in our experience. We also share our data of bad actors on the Perseus platform. ARC connects into them. We have a white label solution called ARC Risk Check with them as well. So all of this information that we have of bad actors or chargebacks or anything like that, we share that on a collaboration platform, and we share information. And ultimately, the fraudsters are collaborating amongst themselves to commit fraud. We need to collaborate as well to protect ourselves against fraud and fraud attacks.
And going back to, we referenced the dark web, there are some of the marketplaces have travel fraud as a service. Yeah. So there are people who do tutorials to other people who want to delve into and find out, how do I commit fraud in the travel business? So there's a tutorial that you can buy, of course, with Bitcoin or whatever crypto they're accepting. But they're collaborating, targeting us. And we're all paying for it.
And they're training each other as well.
They train each other. They talk about which airlines are easier to get over than others. Day of week, time of day, what cards to use. So they might be purchasing compromised credit cards from one part of the dark web and then learning how to commit the fraud through a tutorial service, or just to say, oh, I'm willing to commit the fraud for you if you pay me a little bit. Yeah. So they're collaborating big time behind the scenes. We do what we can to warn. How many fraud alerts do we send out?
Send out hundreds a week.
TAC messages. This is the latest scheme. This is the latest phishing email. But the key is it has to filter down even to the lowest level. The frontline staff have got to see, be aware of these things. It's not just owners and managers and supervisors. The word has to filter down to everyone who has access to a system.
Yeah, thanks for that. Rich, your last thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'm going to feel like I'm a broken record or something, but, I think it's important, as you're protecting yourself in your personal life, protect yourself in your work life. That's valuable. Don't reuse your passwords, right? Don't use the same password for different accounts. Have good cyber hygiene, as Phil mentioned, and educate yourself, right? So whether it's through the training or through the articles that are provided from the industry, but if there's something that you see in the news, make sure that you're take the time to do a little bit of research and read about it so that you're keeping up to date in terms of where compromises might happen.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I think that concludes our session here today. Thank you for your participation and the questions that you asked. I think it was very, very helpful to get your views and your input here today. So thank you to you guys, the panelists here today, and thank you to the audience.